Hi, I'm Andi Mioč and you are watching Context. US President Donald Trump's tariff impositions and pauses have rocked the world of finance and trade. Global markets sharply fell on Wednesday morning when his so-called reciprocal tariffs came into effect, and the week leading up to the day was not much different. Billionaires, including Trump backers, were warning of the meltdown, with one of them going as far as to say that his plan amounts to an economic nuclear war. However, hours later on Wednesday, when the news broke that the higher rates are on pause for 90 days for most, except China, who dared retaliate, markets roared. According to Bloomberg Billionaire Index, just in the day of the pause announcement, the world's wealthiest people saw their combined worth rise by more than $300 billion. At the top of the list, Trump's ally, Elon Musk. Democrat lawmakers accused Trump of market manipulation, while his Republicans called the tariff back and forth the art of the deal. On tariffs as a tool, market mayhem, and the superpowers trade war. We're talking with analysts Francisco Rocha Gonçalves, coming to us from Oeiras, and Diogo Castro Silva, joining us from Sao Paulo. Welcome, gentlemen. Let's dive right into it. Diogo, what's your take on the hectic 24 hours that saw billions evaporate and then materialize? Is this something you think we could see more often with Trump?
Well, hi there. I have no doubt we will see it more often because the policy, as the way it's being made, is not grounded in a process that can be called rational or a policy process. So I think we will see this back and forth much more often in the future, because this is really already had happened in the first term of Trump, and I see it happening again in this term, even in a more extreme fashion.
Well, before the abrupt U-turn on tariffs, Trump took to social media after Wall Street opened for business, saying, quote, "This is a great time to buy," adding his initials, DJT, which also happened to be the same as the ticker for his business that controls the Truth social media. Francisco, would you say that this is what he is being accused of? Is this insider trading?
Well, hello everyone. I don't know if it is insider trading, but this is at least the rise of a certain instability in the global markets that is becoming much dangerous for us all. Business investors and business leaders, the most important thing for them is stability, is to know what they can count on tomorrow and in the future, in the midterm. What is going on is that some big investments are stopping or trying to stop because they don't know what they can count on. And this is becoming a much more dangerous world. I don't know if you can prove insider trading or not, but at least you get suspicion, and you must be. Most of all, we all start to believe that we are living with a president of the United States that can be suspect of the insider trading, and that's a little bit strange for us.
Well, billionaires warned of severe consequences Trump's reciprocal tariffs would bring.
Of course, a lot of them.
Yeah, with some of them suggesting a pause in the tariffs. Diogo, what would you say brought about Trump's pause? Was it concern for the markets after one hell of a week and the sell-off of American government bonds, or was it tactics, as his Republicans say?
Well, I think the main factor, James Carville, a very well-known political operative in the US, and who led Bill Clinton's campaign, got famous with the phrase, "It's the economics, stupid." But the less well-known phrase of him was, if he wanted to be reborn again, he wanted to be reborn as the bond market. And it was the bond market that really made Trump come back on the tariffs, is my opinion. The treasuries, US treasuries, are considered as the most safest class of assets in the world. And that is in normal times before the events of this week. What happened in the treasury bond this week was very ominous, because in a moment of instability, treasuries started to go down as well. And that could have a huge ripple effect in financial institutions, not only in the US, but all around the world. And it's my opinion that it was the treasury market that broke Trump's policy.
Francisco, I want to hear your...
Because just one last point, Francisco alluded to this in his intervention. The contamination of this seesaw of tariffs contaminates trust as a whole on the US economy and policy. And the treasuries is like the canary in the mine of all of that. And if that breaks, everything breaks.
Francisco, I want to hear your thoughts on this as well. Is it the sell-off of American bonds that made Trump reconsider, or was it his business negotiating style?
Well, most of all, let me say one thing. Trump is performing what we can call a bazaar diplomacy. When you go to a bazaar in Morocco, for instance, and you search for a product, the sellers always ask for a lot of money at the beginning, and then you start to negotiate, and in the end of the negotiation, most of the time you can reach a normal price. But until then, you have to negotiate a lot. That's the art of the deal for Trump. And what he's doing is performing this kind of bazaar diplomacy. It's putting a lot of things in. Of course, you can consider the bonds theme. It is the most important thing for the American trade policy and for the American stability of its economy. But Trump is gambling a lot. I don't know if you remember what Elon Musk said about his senior trade advisor, saying that Peter Navarro is dumber than a sack of bricks. And Elon Musk is a very smart man, a very smart businessman who understands what business needs. Business needs stability. Business needs to know what they can count on, and they need as lower tariffs as they can get in order to succeed in a global market. Only if you cannot compete, you need the tariffs. If you think your business is good, if you think that you have the ability or a product that can compete in global markets, you don't need the tariffs. So Trump is protecting products that probably the 21st century economy don't need protection. He's trying to protect an industrial business kind of economy that the Americans cannot compete in. You cannot compete in producing steel or producing concrete as you did in the 50s or 60s, because that kind of product, you can build it or you can produce it in China or in India in a much lower price. He's trying to rebuild a 20th century economy, an industrial 20th century economy that is not the economy of the United States anymore. And he's putting a lot of things in risk. And what Diogo was saying is very important. It's ruining American credibility for the long term, and its credibility to be seen as a benign power, as a stable power in which everyone can count on, is being ruined by this kind of bazaar diplomacy in playing a zero-sum game, that puts everything in risk. If you look at what Jamie Dimon, the CEO of JP Morgan Chase, said, he already said that you don't know if it can go into a depression, but certainly the tariffs had already slower growth. Either you like it or not, the growth is already slower. If it's going to be a depression or not, we can see that in the long term. But this is becoming a risk that no one needed this before.
Well, the markets have slowed down since yesterday's soar after the pause on tariff. But according to data, the wealthiest among the wealthy gained more than $300 billion yesterday. The top three were Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg of Meta, and Nvidia's Jensen Huang. Diogo, how much would you say that these sheer numbers affect their reliance on Trump? And do you see potential for them to turn on him?
Well, the track record of billionaires being in politics is kind of poor and kind of unpredictable. If you go back to even when billionaires are successful in electing political leaders like Berezovsky in Russia, that does not mean life goes well for them afterwards. Because there is a profound misconception about what comes about politics if you elect certain kind of leaders. Unpredictable figures or personalities or authoritarian personalities will not be your unpredictable personality and authoritarian personality. So the potential of the agendas diverging after an election process is huge. So billionaires have allied themselves, and I mean, in the US, you have to go back to 2010 and the decision of the Supreme Court of allowing huge amounts of money to go to political campaigns to understand this combination of money and politics. Now, billionaires in the US can be successful like Elon Musk was in helping to elect Trump, but in the end, the dynamics of politics are their own dynamics, and once elected, a leader will do its own agenda when it's interest for him. So the question is, billionaires who think they own an agenda can be fooled as well down the line. And this kind of policy that Trump is doing shows precisely that. That in the end, he is determining the policy, and that can be detrimental to the interests of whoever has supported him.
In that same vein, not so long ago, Joe Biden, in his last address as president, warned of an oligarchy taking shape in America and wealth, power, and influence threatening democracy. Having witnessed not only this flash episode with tariffs, Francisco, how true would you say Biden's words of warning were?
Well, Biden has done with his farewell address the same thing that Ike Eisenhower has done in the beginning of the 60s, when he said that the United States was going to be was in risk of becoming dependent of the industrial military complex. He spoke about the risk of the American policy or American politics dominated by the billionaires that would distort the democracy. And he has also, in my opinion, set the tone for the discussion in the American politics, in the American policy, public policy, which is different. For the next few years, they will be discussing it. They will be discussing the influence of these billionaires. And of course, he, as a very experienced politician, he looked very well what was happening in the United States and what was in risk. So he was completely right, as Eisenhower was in 1960.
Back to the current moment, Donald Trump claims more than 75 countries reached out seeking trade negotiations and are kissing up to him. Beijing, however, wasted no time to fire back. They introduced a levy hike that brought the total tariff rate on American goods to 84%. Trump immediately kicked it up a notch, bringing the total levy on Chinese goods to 125%. Diogo, where would you say we stand right now in the trade war?
Well, one of the profound misconceptions of Trump in what concerns his tariff policies is that he forgets that other political leaders have political constituencies as well. And that is valid for democracies like Canada or even authoritarian regimes like China. So, being tough with Trump is popular in many of these countries. And so it was in Canada, it inverted completely the political fortunes of the Liberal Party in Canada. And we are seeing the same thing in China. So China will not yield because now it's a matter of political position inside of China as well, of Xi Jinping. So what I see is a continuation of this tit for tat retaliation between China and the US and other countries that see politically advantageous to face Trump like Canada has seen.
Francisco, what's your take on this? What kind of a fallout can be expected in this trade boxing match of Washington and Beijing?
One of two things. I completely agree with Diogo that being against Trump and being against these American tariffs is very popular worldwide. No one likes a bully. Trump is behaving like a bully. And you must see that the great conflict that will appear in the 21st century is not between tariffs, but this is the storm of the day. This is the day-to-day life. The problem is that China is running to dominate international system in 21st century. And Trump, what is giving China, as I said before, with this bazaar diplomacy, with this weaknessing of the American soft power, what is giving is that he's giving the Chinese a lot of goodies. Because they understand very well that worldwide, the United States are losing friends. Trump is destroying the network of alliances that brought the American power in the 20th century. As you can see, the Chinese Prime Minister spoke with South Korea and China proposing a trade-free area in the three countries. Trump has done one thing that nothing has done before for centuries. That was uniting those three countries, Korea, Japan, and China, in the same alliance, in the same free trade area. So he is giving a lot of goodies to the Chinese. So everyone worldwide, when they see Chinese rising tariffs with the United States, and when they see China selling US debt, as they did yesterday, everyone looks up to China and saying that China is facing the bully. So, as I said before, this is a lot of goodies for China all at once.
Another major
yes, I
player.
must agree with Elon Musk.
Yeah, another major player. Now that you mentioned Elon Musk, advocates for zero tariffs with the European Union. The EU paused their own three-phase plan of tariffs on the United States. Diogo, how would you describe the European approach to White House's sudden shift?
Well, the question in European and US relations is much wider. So you have many, using Trump's famous expression, you have a lot of cards in the table because you have security, you have tariffs, you have investment, you have a lot of things. And this is what makes complex the response of Europe to the US, because obviously the question of the security relation looms large. Now, one of the things Europe also, I think, is recognizing is that US is no longer a trustworthy, reliable partner. The news that came out of Germany that they were considering taking out the gold reserves that are in the United States from the German government is a signal that important countries in Europe are seeing the US not as a trustworthy partner. And that means the kind of relation, even in the economic sphere that we had prior to all of these events, I'm afraid is something we cannot go back to, because the trust has evaporated in the same way that European countries are seeing buying US military equipment as not as a reliable supplier of military equipment, like Portugal, by the way.
Well, the relationships are changing, as you've mentioned, between the EU and US, and as Francisco mentioned, between Beijing, Seoul, and Tokyo. Francisco, I know you spoke of the goodies that China is going to get, but who would you say stands to gain from this entire trade war? Who could fill the gaps caused by a reduction in trade between the two biggest powers in the world?
Well, the first thing is that we're all going to lose. If we continue in this path and we start entering in a protectionist world, everyone will lose in the long term. But who will win, probably, is the factory of the world. The truth is that Donald Trump has a very large problem to solve, because he has elections in 22 years. He has a Congress to elect. He has a third of Senate to elect, and he's going to have problems with that in the long term. The chairman of the Chinese Communist Party doesn't have the same kind of problems, and is in this for the long term. This is a problem for the 20th century. It's very difficult to fill the gap right now, but China was already trying to speak with the European Union to build a more profound trade relationship with the European Union, which is very complex because of what Diogo was saying, because of a historical relation, multidimensional relation with the European Union, with Europe and the United States. And because the United States has safeguarded Europe for decades. When you see the German Chancellor taking a decision like that, you must understand that in the 90s, back in the 50s, and then in the 90s, it was the US that brought Germany back to the international system, and was the United States in the 90s that brought Germany together again. You know, in the 60s, when the Cuban Missile Crisis occurred, there's an historical phone call from Kennedy to President de Gaulle, when President Kennedy told Mr. President, the Soviets are doing this, they're installing missiles in Cuba. If you want, I can send you the proofs. And the response of President de Gaulle was to say that, Mr. President, if you tell me that the Russians or the Soviets back then are putting missiles in Cuba, I don't need any proof. I just need your word. This is not the world in which we're living anymore. The confidence, the trust has evaporated, as Diogo said, and it's going to take a lot of time to repair.
Well, obviously, confidence is in short supply these days. But Diogo, do you see who could fill the gap that will inevitably occur in both of the countries' markets, the goods, the raw materials?
Well, like Francisco said, I think we are on the road to be all the world poor, more confrontational, because trade wars, they bring other wars. This is a historical fact. So we are seeing a world where it's kind of more free for all, world where there is a kind of vacuum. And this is extremely dangerous, not only for the economic prosperity of us all, but for the security of all. Because basically you are inviting countries to behave not in a lawful way, but on the might is right way. So you are seeing, everybody has, for example, problems with borders and frontiers. There is not a country in the world that has not a complaint about a border and a frontier. So are we going now to do them in a military fashion? Are we going to solve that in a military fashion? And furthermore, for 80 years, trade was the basis of worldwide prosperity. And no country more than China has benefited from that. Are we going, and this kind of war, it will make us all poor in the long run. And this is the sad reality of it all.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us, sharing your insights and opinions. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. That's all in this edition of Context. Stay tuned to A News.